ready to head off the trails. I'm the Cryptid Huntress, Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on an incredible journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We would really appreciate it. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. You can find me, the Cryptid Huntress, at thecryptidhuntress.com. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Cryptid Huntress, and visit my shop, War Woman Goods. You can find it on Etsy. Shout out to Bumblefoot for that amazing intro music. We really appreciate it here. All right, we have an amazing guest tonight at SOR. I have cryptozoologist and author Ryan Edwards here tonight. But don't forget, right after my show, After Hours has a great program set up for y'all tonight. So let's get to our guest. Ryan Edwards is a cryptozoologist and author of Cryptids of the World, a conclusive guidebook to the menagerie of enigmatic animals seen across our natural world. He has been fascinated with the weird and unexplained since he was a child. Like most kids, he had an interest in prehistoric life and animals. He continues to spend a lot of time researching and studying the fossil record and our natural world. He's always tried to look at the world from a scientific and logical manner, and he does the same in the field. His hope is to help this astonishing field and pass knowledge to others and help solve some of the biggest mysteries of the modern world. Ryan's YouTube channel, The Cryptid Chronicles, is dedicated to the world of cryptozoology and its cryptids, focused on bringing new perspectives to the amazing world of cryptids. All right, well, I would like to welcome to the show tonight Mr. Ryan Edwards. Hello. Hey, Ryan. It is so great to have you on tonight. Thanks for being here.
Of course. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, I got to meet you at the Alabama Bigfoot Conference. How fun was that?
It was fun. It was a good event. It was very interesting to hear everyone there, to see a lot of researchers, and talking to a lot of eyewitnesses. People don't realize how big Bigfoot is in Alabama because it just doesn't get the publicity that the Northeast does in the Northwest.
Oh, yeah, it does. You know what? I actually do research in Alabama sometimes, so I know they have Bigfoots in Alabama. Yeah. I live right on the border of Georgia and Alabama, so my team absolutely knows there's a lot of Bigfoots out there. But you're right. Absolutely. Now, I am really impressed with your knowledge of cryptids, Ryan, and you have written a book. And you had that at the conference, and it's from like A to Z, right? Like of all the different cryptids of the entire world. Yes. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yes, Cryptids of the World, it contains 192 different cryptids. Even though most of them, what I would say, just different colloquial names for the same creature. Like for instance, here in North America, you have Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Falcon, Ohio Grassman, Woolly Booger. You have all these different names for the same creature. But it consists of you can go from lake monsters to Bigfoot-like creatures to flying cryptids, all these menagerie of different animals around the world. And it's something I've been working on, ever since I was a kid. I remember back, I think it was high school, I had all this knowledge about cryptids, and I was like, you know what, let me just write it all down as like a journal so I don't forget stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of had it, and then I was like, you know what? Once I graduated, I was like, let me see if I can get this published, because I think it would be a great stepping stone to get into the world of cryptozoology. Because before this, I was just kind of a kid loving cryptids, kind of doing research. But once I actually had the book published, I was actually in the world of cryptozoology, meeting researchers, meeting eyewitnesses, going to conferences. So I kind of used this book as a really good stepping stone into this world of peculiar phenomena and anomalous animals.
Yeah. It's so cool that you decided to start just a simple journal and start writing some thoughts down, and it became a book. And I mean, this is like a passion project. I can really appreciate that. So that's how it all starts. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got to hang out with you at Texas Front Porch one day on a show, and Tex was like, well, hey, let's just everybody pick a letter of the alphabet, and Ryan, you tell us a cryptid, okay, that matches that letter of the alphabet. And you were so on point. You had multiple cryptids for each of the letters that we chose. So yeah, well, my big thing is Bigfoot and Sasquatch,
Yes.
and I thought maybe tonight you could talk to us about the origins of Sasquatch, because you have a perspective on it that I haven't studied as much, and that's the origins of Sasquatch. So if you'd like to talk about that tonight, I would absolutely love that.
Of course.
All right.
With me, my perspective on Sasquatch, I come at it from what people like to call apers. I come at it from it's an unknown primate, most likely related to more hominid origins. Because with primates, you have hominids and hominins. Hominins are humans. Uh, Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis are direct ancestors. The hominids are the lower primates, like chimpanzees, the pongonoids, the gorillas, Drypacini, parts of Gigantopithecus. I believe at least there's two or three major candidates for Sasquatch in a biological sense. Of course, we have Gigantopithecus, which has always gotten like a lot of the publicity, a lot of limelight. But in recent years, we've been going away from that perspective. Because pretty much the main reason Giganto got the recognition is due to the size of it. If Gigantopithecus were to stand on two legs, it would be about 9 feet tall.
Well, let's see. I've got a picture here. So
Yeah.
this is an example of a Gigantopithecus,
Yes.
a big guy.
And the original reconstructions by Dr. Grover Krantz demonstrated Giganto being bipedal. But recent studies have shown most likely it was a quadruped. With being by a quadruped and being Bigfoot-like, it's very unlikely that it would turn into what we now know as Sasquatch. For instance, we only know primarily the jawline. And if you look at the jaw, it doesn't move out enough for a larynx to come in. We don't know where the foramen magnum is. The foramen magnum is where the brainstem goes into the skull. And if that is anteriorly placed, that means on the back of the skull, that's just a quadruped.
Oh,
It's close
interesting.
to the jawline, it demonstrates a biped. We don't know
Okay.
if it was bipedal or quadrupedal, but most researchers like myself believe it's a quadruped. So
Wow.
we look at other candidates for Sasquatch, and has gone into the more hominin side. There's the Paranthropus. Paranthropus was a human ancestor, not a human ancestor. It wasn't a direct ancestor, but it was
Hmm.
a human like ape hominin in prehistoric Africa. Paranthropus is what is also known as a robust Australopithecine. It was about maybe 5-6 feet tall, covered in fur, very robust jaws, and a sagittal crest. And the sagittal crest demonstrates it had large temporalis muscles. It was built for mastication. It was built for chewing. And most likely, Paranthropus was originally thought to only just mostly feed on grass. But recent studies have shown it might have eaten also meat. And recent studies have also shown it was not just in one environment. It was in woods, plains, and all these different environments similar to what Bigfoot's like.
Uh-huh.
But recently, I've been going down another road of what Bigfoot's like. I believe it might be an older hominid, Miocene ape. Whether it's what we call Drypithecus or Denuvius,
Uh-huh.
I believe most likely Sasquatch is one of those creatures. It's a lot older genus than what we originally thought.
Okay. Do you say Miocene? Is that what you just said?
Yes, Miocene.
Okay. So I think I have some pictures of those tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because what you have on the picture here is a reconstruction of Drypithecus fortani.
Okay.
Drypithecus or Drypacini was a genera of ape from the Miocene Europe. And during the Miocene epoch, this was maybe 17 to 23 million years ago. And this was during in
Oh,
Europe.
wow.
And during in Europe at that point, it was very much it was wet, human environment. It's very similar to like the Florida Everglades, and other
Okay.
parts are similar to the Pacific Northwest. Very wet, very wooded, evergreen trees, and Dryopithecus was very much found in that area. It's very common. Dryopithecus actually was found from Europe all the way to Mongolia down to even Africa. So it's
Oh,
very
wow.
much everywhere, and it was adapted to many different environments. And
Wow.
that brings into question, if this is Bigfoot, how does it look like Sasquatch now?
Yeah, because it looks more human now, right? I mean, they're still big though. I mean, we have some Sasquatch that are reported to be 12 to 14 feet tall. I mean,
Yes,
that's pretty big. That's even bigger than Gigantopithecus, isn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
And that brings into question, like, okay, how did it get to how it is now? And I've created at least a hypothesis is that Bigfoot is pretty much an example of Pleistocene megafauna. And
Okay.
megafauna was the giant animals found during the Pleistocene and Pliocene, about maybe 2 million to 10,000 years ago. Think of like mammoths, saber-toothed cats, short-faced bears, American lions. I believe if Dryopithecus is what we now know as Sasquatch, it traveled into North America during what you call the Pliocene. The Pliocene is about maybe 17 to 18 million years ago. Once it entered North America, it got more robust. It got larger. And one thing that's really interesting is that recent studies on a creature called Danuvius. This is a very similarly genetic wise to Dryopithecus. And Danuvius's limbs demonstrate an almost bipedal stance, demonstrating that bipedalism, being able to walk on two legs, adapted and evolved a lot older than what we thought. Knuckle walking, like how gorillas and chimps walk on their knuckles, is a recent adaptation. And more like gibbons, like if you've seen a gibbon walk on two legs, it just walks on two legs and doesn't really put its hands on the ground. That
Yeah.
is how most primates walked back in the day. And if bipedalism was already evolving, and this was 17, 18 million years ago, the human line of like hominins only evolved about maybe 3 million years ago. So this creature has had a jump start. It's a lot older than our line. So its evolutionary track might be very what you call convergently evolved to humans.
Wow.
It's not directly related, but it's on very similar morphology. Like, think of hyenas and wolves. They're very
Yeah.
similar pack hunters, but the hyenas are not related to canines at all. They're actually part of the feliform, the carnivore. The caniform is a totally different group. So it's like
Wow.
convergent evolution. Sharks and dolphins, the thylacine and wolves, all these animals have convergently evolved because they're very similar niches.
Wow.
And if we look at what we know about Dryopithecus, one thing that's very interesting to me is what you call the intramembral index. The intramembral index is the distance from like arms to legs. If you look at the intramembral index of a supposed Sasquatch, if you look at Patty, for instance,
Yeah.
Patty's arms are a little bit longer than her legs. Her arms, I believe, are 90 inches and her legs like 80 inches. This is an intramembral index of 1 to zero point 0.8. And
Wow.
humans is 1 to 1. Our arms are as long as our legs. Look at the Vitruvian Man of Da Vinci. It shows
Hmm.
it perfectly. While the intramembral index of a great ape of gorillas is 1 to zero point 0.4. Its arms are a lot longer than its legs, demonstrating a quadrupedal stance.
Wow.
So the Bigfoot intramembral index is right between great apes and humans.
Hmm.
And the intramembral index to Dryopithecus is 1 to zero point 0.8, demonstrating its morphology was already going to a bipedal stance. And this was
Wow.
18 million years ago. So if it had evolved and survived into the Pleistocene, would the megafaunal species of North America, I believe it would have evolved into what we now know as Bigfoot. If you look at
Wow.
if we look at the predators alone, you have the short-faced bear, which was a giant bear that was about a ton. a ton in weight. You had the American lion, which was a lion 2 times the size of what we now know as the African lion. You had Macayardantine cats, or the saber-toothed cats. You had forest rockets, which were the terror birds, giant 9 foot tall
Yeah.
carnivorous birds. Of
Yeah.
course, this creature
Yeah.
is larger, and its behavior even indicates that. The cryptic behavior. I think with Sasquatch, they have learned, okay, let's not fight because that brings more of whatever I'm fighting. Let me be able to get away from them, like how to get away from humans. Most likely,
Yes.
behavior evolved long ago, but with the giant predatory species back then, and
Yeah.
kind of got perfected with us humans.
Yeah, I love how you have the scientific side of Bigfoot and their possible origins. I'm out there, and they say this is like the ape versus the woo camp, and the primate versus the woo, and I think it's both. Honestly, when it comes down to it, I'm a field researcher, and I've experienced a whole lot of very paranormal stuff that goes on with these creatures or beings. So I love hearing this side of it too, of its origins and where it could be coming from. And honestly, Ryan, when it comes to like the woo aspect of Bigfoot, that which I believe in, and I've witnessed myself. Um, I think that it's I don't know. I just think that there's a mix, and I think even as humans, we have an ability to do paranormal things that we're not even aware of yet, like psychic abilities and telepathy and all the stuff that people say Bigfoots can do.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to bring you on to hear about this stuff with the origins and the just the science of where these things have come from. This is awesome. Yeah.
But one thing I do bring up with the whole woo aspect of the Sasquatch,
Yeah.
if this hypothesis were to be correct, if these creatures started evolving like 20 million years ago, this is way older than the human line. We don't
Mhm.
know what type of adaptations and characteristics they could have. If it's a lot older than us, they could be more complex in certain areas than us. Maybe this paranormal aspect to these creatures, if it is there, maybe it's just uh, something we don't understand yet. Like the whole saying,
Mhm.
magic is just science we don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
the telepathic, psychological, more metaphysical side, maybe this is just an aspect that has evolved in them because they're a lot older than what we are.
They're definitely old. It's definitely goes way back. And some people wonder if like Sasquatch has human DNA in it as well.
Yes.
So
Like a lot of people like one thing I bring up is Native Americans say the Sasquatch, the Sakit, the no matter what name they use, were the people of the woods. What I
yeah.
say is, well, it could be a metaphor. The closest thing to a Sasquatch is a human, so maybe they just call them a human. Doesn't necessarily mean they are people. It just could
Mhm.
be that the closest thing that they had to Sasquatch were us, humans. So they
Yeah.
called them a people. I believe
Yes.
they show very human-like characteristics, like possible proto-culture, proto-language, things like that. Maybe they could be on a convergently evolved to us,
Mhm.
but I don't believe they're exactly human. And because the one
Right.
reason for that primarily is that, at least in my research, I don't see a really big correlation between tool use and Sasquatch. If you look at the human line,
Mhm.
complex tools have always been with us. 3 million years ago, the Olduvon tools were like rocks made into like hammers, things like that. And these were made by before before genus Homo. These are made by Pranthropus and
Mhm.
the Australopithecus. So if Sasquatch were these creatures, I would suspect them to be using tools. But at least in my research, I don't see that occurring as well. At least not complex tools. Maybe sticks, rocks, things like that. I've heard of them maybe weaving. But even if you look at the hand morphology of Sasquatch, the thumb is a lot lower than arms. It's very ape-like. With that, it doesn't have what you call a precision grip like this. That's a precision grip. They wouldn't By the hand morphology that we can speculate on from handprints and casts, they wouldn't have the dexterity of a human hand, demonstrating that
Interesting.
they wouldn't really be able to like weave. And like I've heard stories of them braiding hair on horses. Technically, if we look at their hand with speculative hand morphology, they wouldn't have the dexterity to be able to do that,
Yeah. Well,
suggesting
we've heard about I think it's called witch knots, but I think it's something pretty nefarious actually.
yeah.
I've heard about that. So we won't get into details tonight on that. But you're right. You're right. Yeah. That's interesting. So they probably don't have human DNA, is what you're saying,
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Unless if interbreeding did occur at some point in history, it could have. Because if we look at our own DNA,
Hmm.
maybe 8 to 9% of it isn't even human. 2% of our DNA is virus. People don't realize that. Other
Yeah.
parts are Neanderthal, Denisovan, and other unknown hominids. So we interbred with other human species in the past. Like people don't realize 10 to 12,000 years ago, there's 4 or 5 different human species. You had Homo floresiensis on Flores, the Denisovans in parts of Mongolia and Nepal. You had Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals, relic populations of Homo erectus, and of course Homo sapiens. It was
Yeah.
almost like a real life Lord of the Rings. I like to say we had all these species living alongside of each other, and sometimes they interbred. So maybe if Sasquatch was at least closely related to our own genus, maybe interbreeding did occur. If that would produce a viable child, we don't know. I don't know if a viable progeny would occur.
Interesting.
Look at, for instance, I've turned, I think it was like Dmitry Nekov in Soviet Russia. He was trying to mix human and chimp DNA. That doesn't work because it's not the same. It doesn't have the same number of alleles, so you cannot produce a viable offspring.
Hmm.
At most, you can produce a hybrid, but a hybrid is sterile. It will not able to have progeny itself, so you cannot
Yes.
make the whole species off of that. So, if
Interesting.
let's just take for instance during the Pleistocene, if humans and Sasquatch had interbred, if this would produce a viable progeny, that progeny itself would be a hybrid. It would not be a whole new species. So it would
Oh,
be
okay.
likely that human DNA would still persist in modern Sasquatch.
Interesting. I'm trying to pull up a picture now. I'm uploading one because it's to show the different types of Bigfoots. Okay, because
Yeah,
it's not just one type of Sasquatch. We have a variety, Ryan, and so and they range from anything from like a Patty type, like a
Browns,
Patterson,
yeah,
yeah, to
because
a Gugway to Dogman. I mean, they say Dogman, but I think that Dogman is something totally different. But I don't know. They got the snout or muzzle ones, like the Type 3, which would be a Dogman, I guess, and they've got
yeah,
the relic hominid Type 4s. So
yeah. Like wouldn't me personally, at least my belief set is that I don't believe there's different species of Sasquatch. I believe it's what you call an ecomorph. An ecomorph is when a creature is the same species but has morphologically had different characteristics. Take, for instance, wolves. Wolves in
okay,
Canada are a lot larger than wolves here in the lower 48. Black leopards. The leopards in Europe and parts of Europe back in the Pleistocene had long fur due to the cold. The leopards seen in parts of India have longer fur than leopards in South Africa. These are just different morphological characteristics for different environments. Like
uh-huh.
let's look at the environments across North America. You have all these different ecologies and ecosystems. I believe that due to the fact that Sasquatch is in all these different areas, they morphologically change, not genotypically. Genotypics is like a new species. Phenotypically is physical aspects. I believe they physically changed, but they aren't a whole new species. Like, for instance, like the skunk ape. A lot of people are like, oh, well, skunk ape's not Sasquatch. It is the same species, but just due to the fact that it's in a different environment than the ones in the Northwest, they look different. Doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily suggest a whole new species or subspecies. It just shows an ecomorph. It's morphologically different than what we think of like the patty type of Sasquatch.
Yeah. Yeah, they all look a lot of them look very different. We do have a question. Is it true that Sasquatch is an herbivore?
Technically, what you have with herbivores is it's omnivore. Herbivores primarily, well, technically the term herbivore doesn't really exist anymore. It has shown that herbivores actually eat meat every so often. Like there's videos of deer eating chicks. So what you call an obligate herbivore is an animal that's primarily herbivorous, but sometimes eats meat.
Yeah.
We have a pure omnivore like bears or Indians. Sasquatch is most likely a omnivore. Very it eats meat, uh, fruits, all types of things. Because it's actually shown that if these creatures do eat fruits, primates that eat fruits that produce their own seeds persist better than ones that do not. Simply due to the fact that when a chimp eats, like let's just take for instance like an apple, they eat the seeds, and then they, of course, through fecal matter, they release the seeds. So they're pretty much planting the future generation of apple trees. So if the Sasquatch do the same thing, they're more likely to persist. And of course, there's always been hunting deer, hunting elk. I believe if you break it down with Sasquatch, there's research I've done into this with the caloric intake they need every day. Due to the
Uh-huh.
fact of their large size and their large cranium, the large cranium, so large brain, they would probably need about 2,000 calories per day.
Yeah.
And this is
It's a lot
through,
of food.
yeah. And an interesting thing is another animal on the North American habitat that needs 2,000 calories per day is the black bear.
Bear. Yeah. And they're not going to get that just off berries alone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, a lot of people like to use the black bear as like an indicator species. An indicator species, like, okay, black bear is here, Sasquatch could be here. And that correlation between caloric intake is very interesting. So, if let's just take, for instance, bears are indicator species for Sasquatch, they both need the same amount of food every day. So, this demonstrates that they could, most likely, they would live in the same environments. And, like, if you look at the anatomy of Sasquatch, it's most likely that they do need a large amount of food and they need a lot of meat with that. They wouldn't be straight predators, but they would just need a lot of calories.
Oh yeah. You know what? I gotta say, I do know I have done some remote viewing of some pretty angry Sasquatches up in Alaska, and they may or may not have eaten a human or two. Okay, I'm just saying. I'm not saying all of them do, but they have been known to eat humans.
Yeah.
Okay, so
With any, of course, Sasquatch aren't a monster that live out in the woods, but with any animal, if it's a food source, they'll use it. Like, for instance, there's been times of pets. Their owner
uh-huh.
dies, so the pet starts eating their owner.
Oh yeah, I've
So
heard that.
if there's a food source, they'll take it. And with Sasquatch, I believe just simply with their caloric intake, they can't just be herbivorous. Like,
Uh-huh.
and their behavior doesn't demonstrate that either. Their dentition. If you look at the dentition, the teeth of like Gigantopithecus and Paranormal, it demonstrates a very herbivorous diet. What you call a
Yeah.
dual phagus teeth. Dual phagus means they're able to like crack bamboo or even crack bone. So I
Or
have,
bone. Wow.
yeah. So like hyenas are dual phagus. The bull phaginae are dual phagus. I've kind of created a hypothesis that the Sasquatch might be dual phagus because they could, if they, let's just say, could crack bone, they wouldn't use that for hunting, they would use that for scavenging. Bone marrow is a very good source of calories and very good source of nutrition.
And probably delicious. I don't know. I mean,
So
when it comes, I know cow marrow is like a delicacy, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
like people use it because it's a very good source of nutrition.
Hmm.
So let's just say, for instance, if Bigfoot was able to find like a dead deer, why let a whole group of resources go to waste? So if they're able to adapt and evolve and to be able to crack bone, that's a whole new food source found right there through
Yeah.
being able to open up bone. That's also another like convergent evolution to prehistoric bears. The
Hmm.
Tremartine bears of like the short-faced bear, they were super scavengers. Like they have shorter jaws because with a long jaw you don't have as much leverage. With a shorter jaw you have more leverage. The
Yeah.
having a pulley system or something like that. So with Bigfoot not having what you call a prognatic jaw, like if you look at baboons, it's something called prognatic. It means like they protrude out. If they have a shorter jaw like ours, that's more biting leverage. So if they
Yeah.
have this really strong dentition, they could be able to crack bones.
Well,
And
what
that,
about? Oh, I don't mean to interrupt. What about like a gugway, or even a skunk ape? These things. The monkey devils, I think, or the devil monkeys.
yeah,
I mean, it's a little bit different than your normal Sasquatch,
yeah.
but they lump these in kind of together. So
Which
they. Mhm.
would me the devil monkey phenomena does get grouped in with Sasquatch simply due to the fact that they're both primates. And
Okay.
with me, I don't believe there's correlation there. With my hypothesis is that if Sasquatch did travel into North America, I believe the devil monkey is a primate that evolved originally here in North America. Now
Oh,
I
okay.
realized, but the primate lineage actually originated here in North America during the Paleocene, about maybe 30 to 40 million years ago, about almost 100 million years ago, like 30 to 40 million years ago. So primates, our earliest ancestors, evolved here in North America.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
And then suddenly during the early Miocene, they just kind of disappeared. The
Uh huh.
false record just kind of disappeared, called Cetus down in Panama. But ask any primatologist, simply due to the fact they don't find a fossil, doesn't mean the creature went extinct. That's the last known fossil, not the last known individual. So it could be that there is a fossil record of primates living here in North America, but just that we haven't found it yet. And maybe
Interesting.
these devil monkeys have convergently evolved, or maybe like baboons in Africa, or the other like dog-like primates that they call them, like uh, what is it called, Dinopithecus out in Africa. But Dinopithecus is of course presumed to be extinct. So it's
Yeah.
really that these devil monkeys are truly a primate that evolved here in North America and lived alongside Bigfoot, but does not correlate genetically to Sasquatch.
Well, interesting. Now, how would we explain the Yowie down in Australia? I mean, where did the Yowie come from? I have a picture of that. I know we're kind of jumping around the globe here, but um,
Act- Actually, with the Yowie, I have two or three main hypotheses. I believe the Yowie is truly a hominin, a human species. I believe
oh, interesting.
Homo, we know from Homo floresiensis, it was a creature that he traveled to Flores and became smaller, called insular dwarfism. Insular dwarfism is an animal gets smaller. On Flores, there were elephants the size of sheepdogs because it was a small island. I believe if the ancestors of Homo floresiensis had gone down to Australia, they would have gotten larger due to the megafauna species indigenous to that area. You had Megalania, which was a giant Komodo dragon the size, but that was like 20 feet long. You had You had Dolicholae, which was a marsupial lion. You had thylacines. You had Diprotodon, which were giant 2-ton wombats. Pocoptodon,
Oh, the wombat. I love
Pocop,
wombats.
which was a 9-foot tall kangaroo.
9-foot tall kangaroo. Wow.
Yes.
I did not know that existed. That is wild.
Yeah. So maybe the
I could fit in
Yowie,
that pouch.
yeah, because like there's literally the Joeys of Procoptodon would have been almost the size of humans because like how
Oh my
large creatures would
gosh.
be.
Wow. I've never heard of that before. That's wild.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe Yowie evolved alongside these creatures. The one issue with that is trying to think of the particular name for it. I believe it's called not Bergman's line, but I think Sanderson line. The Sanderson line. I'm trying to think if I can think of the name right now. I do have it written down somewhere. The Wallace line. The Wallace line is a kind of make believe ecological area. It
Uh-huh.
states right about Sumatra that separates animals from Indo-Australia and Indo-Asia. Anything that's Australian doesn't go up north of that line. Anything that goes, nothing can go from Asia can go beyond that line. But this is kind of an imaginary line. And if you look at Homo floresiensis, that already proves that a human species crossed the Wallace line during prehistory. What tells us it didn't go farther south and it didn't evolve into what we now know as the Yowie. So it's a
Hmm.
possibility that maybe we believe the ancestors to Homo floresiensis was Homo erectus. So maybe Homo erectus kept on going to Australia, and then thanks to the megafaunal species already indigenous to that area, they became larger and even scarier and became what we now know as the Yowie. And maybe even
Wow.
the hyper aggression of the Yowie might demonstrate this. They would have to be hyper aggressive with the other scary species that lived alongside them. So this
Yeah.
is like why they have the behavior set that they have is due to the fact that they lived alongside other megafaunal species.
Interesting. I actually have a lot of viewers from Australia that watch my channel and watch the show here. So
Oh,
shout out to all my Australian friends out there, okay, that are watching tonight. Yeah, I just thought the Yowie would be a smaller size Sasquatch. That's always what I assumed.
like, well, one thing I always bring up is that a lot of people bring up Yeti, Almas, Yowie, Yeren, they're all interrelated. I don't personally believe that they're all interrelated. They might have very similar morphologies, but phenotypic morphology does not mean genotypic relation. Like it's like saying a rabbit and a chihuahua are related because they're both small, furry, and have big ears. Just because
Yeah.
they're both morphologically similar doesn't mean they're both genotypically similar. Like I believe maybe like the Yeti of Nepal and Bhutan and Tibet might truly be like surviving Gigantopithecus, or maybe even Homo denisova.
Mhm.
The Almasti could be surviving Denisovans and surviving Neanderthals. And with Sasquatch possibly being part of Dryopithecus, all these species have very similar morphologies, very similar body structures, but may not be actually related to each other. Like there's stories of human hairy giants all across the world. Doesn't necessarily mean they are related to each other. They might just have very similar morphologies.
That's a very good point because talking about Dogman, for instance, okay, and that's something that I've really been looking into lately with my remote viewing and these Dogman attacks that have allegedly happened all
And
over the
we
United States.
and
You
also the
know,
well, I remember you did a remote viewing investigation of that.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. Now, the dog man is something, it's a little bit different. Now, I know there's a dog man on the right. Okay. That's kind of a dog man.
Yeah,
I looked into the beasts of LBL and the land between the lakes, and also there's a dog man at Joe Bald Recreation Area out in Missouri, and the Beasts of Bray Road, and all the there's just dog man reports. Even Tex from Texas Front Porch had
yeah.
experienced a
There's a
dog man.
yeah, they extend from
Yeah.
16,
Well,
I believe, somewhere around there.
yeah, he was 16. And so when I'm looking at this, I really did a deep dive into it when I was looking at it, remote viewing it, and it's not related to Sasquatch at all. Okay.
Yeah.
So from what my data suggests, it is not related at all. So, and there's so many different types of those as well. So, as you know, there's like the hyena type, and you said a hyena is not even a dog, right? It's not even a canine.
Yeah, and it's a possibility. Like one thing I talk about Dogman is that I like to call it the ecological and anatomical implausibility of Dogman or bipedal canines. If you look at the bipedal, the anatomical structure of Dogman, it doesn't make sense for a canine. Like this might be a kind of a weird thing to think about, but I look at people describing the pelvic girdle of Dogman. They describe a very thin waist with like really dog-like gluteus maximus. And if you
Yes.
look at if you look at primates, humans, we have a large gluteus maximus, a large gluteal muscles.
Hmm.
We're the only primate to have that due to the fact that gluteal muscles are very important for bipedal locomotion. Dogman eyewitnesses don't describe gluteal muscles. So this is a muscle that would be very important for bipedal locomotion that these creatures don't have. So that
Yeah.
just causes me to think the anatomy does not meet what eyewitnesses are talking about. The ecology of them does not meet up either. If you take, for instance, dogmen are seen in the same areas as Bigfoot and bears and wolves, there's too many major predators then. Like, for instance, let's just take Yellowstone, for instance. There's Bigfoot sightings, bears, wolves that we know about, and then there's dogman sightings. There's some in a niche. Like a niche is like apex predator, omnivore, apex omnivore. Dogman would be an apex predator, but that niche is already held by wolves and bears. So there's an ecological implausibility is that these creatures wouldn't be able to exist at that point. There'd be too much infighting that either one or another would go extinct. So like when people talk about like Bigfoots versus Dogman, at this point, if these creatures were both physical creatures, one would already be extinct by now. But yet we have both of them coexisting in the same environment. To me, this demonstrates most likely Bigfoot is a physical creature, and the Dogman is of some other origin. Whether it's ultra-terrestrial, paranormal, spiritual, all that, I'm not sure. That's just
Yeah.
not what I study. But
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Listen, I've looked into it. I mean, I have seen that some of them actually come from facilities and are it suggests that our government perhaps and governments around the world are creating these things. Okay, so like chimeras, things like that. So but they're like I said, I've got we got the whole paranormal side to it too.
yeah,
So they are an anomaly
yeah.
for sure.
Like with my at least perspective, the very human-like cryptids like Goatman, Sheep Squatch, Dogman, these creatures can't ecologically exist and can't morphologically exist. So I believe these creatures are of another origin, not they haven't evolved naturally. Rather, they were genetically created or of some other origin. We don't know. But I don't believe they are truly like cryptids. They are truly animals that evolved here on Earth and
Yeah.
in the natural world.
Yeah, there's an interesting comment here. If we could tag a great white, why can't we tag a dogman? Well, Eddie, I believe that governments have tagged dogmen. Okay, and that's something that people say that they're collared and chipped. Some of them are. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's just
Even at that point,
heard.
you have to look at the intelligence difference. If these
Hmm.
dogmen are real, that suggests a high intelligence. Almost, I want to say human-like intelligence, but maybe very similar to like an orca or a primate, or maybe even some pigs, some swine smarter than chimpanzees. But that's just a high intelligence. Great whites are predators, so of course they have a higher intelligence than prey species,
Hmm.
but they don't have the intelligence of like an orca whale or a chimpanzee. Like one thing I like to talk about with Bigfoot and like with chimpanzees, primates have a higher spatial awareness than humans. Like there's certain tests that you can do with a 2 month old chimpanzee that a human 2 year old wouldn't be able to pass. Like with maybe like matching colors and matching shapes. Humans wouldn't be able to do that as fast as a chimpanzee. Chimps have
Yeah.
a higher spatial awareness. And this suggests that Bigfoots would also have a higher spatial awareness and maybe even these dogman creatures.
Interesting. Yeah. Werewolf was saying this. No one is a cryptid expert. And that's totally right. Like,
Yes.
none of us are experts on it, but we're all learning, from each other. And,
Yeah.
we go out in the field. Like, I go out and do Bigfoot field research, and, you're Ryan's doing the research, book research and stuff, and it's so important for us to all put this together, and to share our information so that we can start to figure these things out, because
Yeah.
nobody really knows.
Like
We have specialties, but no one's an expert. So you're right.
like I like to make the joke, yeah, cryptozoology is a science of unknown animals. No, it's a science of speculation. All that
Yeah,
we are saying are hypotheses and speculative ideas. They're very hopefully educated guess, but they're still guesses. We don't know for sure. Until a body
exactly.
is found, all it is a theory. It's not a proven thing. But even like gravity is a hypothesis, it's a theory. It's been proven, but still a theory. That's the thing with like cryptozoology. We are not experts in this. All we do is to speculate on it. Like even
Right.
people that have been in this field since the '60s don't say they're experts in this field.
Yeah. And if anyone says they're expert, it's reason to give a side eye. I'm just saying.
Yes, like at
Yeah.
that
So,
point, ego is taken over. One thing I
yeah.
believe with this field is that do not let your ego control you. Do not believe that you are always correct. And some people they create hypotheses and theories that they 100% think they are right. So anyone against them is wrong. Don't get married to your theories. Number one, your hypothesis
Right.
might be erroneous. So don't make yourself look like an idiot trying to prove an erroneous, or make yourself look just like a high ego person. Like say you're wrong. Everyone's wrong.
Right.
Like
And just have an open mind and be willing to change your mind. I've changed my mind on air live on a show before. Okay.
yeah,
Because I was presented evidence that was other than what I had thought it was. So, and it's fine. And I can laugh about it, and it's fine. I welcome that kind of information. I want that kind of information, because I know my way, it's not always right, but we're doing the best we can out here, everybody. Right, Ryan?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're all trying to get to the same solution. We might get there differently, but we'll still get there. It's like with two people are driving to the same area. You might take a right and the other person takes a left, and you both get there. You just went different ways. And like one thing I
Right.
always talk about with like what Jason talks about, Jason McLean, we all have pieces of the puzzle. And if we all put these puzzle pieces together, we'll get to the truth. But if you hold back information, if you hold back your puzzle pieces, you won't be able to get to the solution. So all it is
Yeah.
about sharing info and creating connections within this field. Because there are certain points that I don't agree with other people, but I still talk to them due to the fact that okay, just because we disagree doesn't necessarily mean I see you as a bad person. Of course not. It's all about just sharing information. And I'm not here
Yeah.
to try to prove my hypotheses or anything like that or change people's minds. I'm simply here to share my opinions. If people think they're wrong, I let them say that. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can go back and change my hypotheses to see if I can alter them to the new data.
That's how we learn, and that's how we grow. And Eddie Rodriguez, thank you so much. That is so appreciated. We
Yeah.
appreciate your super chat there. Thank you. You are absolutely right. I mean, I just want to learn. I'm in this to learn and to have fun. And so before we go tonight, we've got a few more minutes. Ryan, how about we talk about some of your other favorite cryptids? Because we've talked about Sasquatch, we've talked about Dogman, we've talked about the Gugway and all the Sasquatch Bigfoot stuff. Is there anything else that that really stands out that you want to talk about tonight as far as cryptids go?
With me, I do research for like what I like to call like the correlation between the fossil record and cryptozoology,
Okay.
like presumed to be extinct creatures seen to the modern day. If you take, for instance, creatures that are presumed to be like unknown canines, you have the Wahila up in Alaska, up in Canada, large white wolf that has very bear-like characteristics. It has almost like a bear-like body but a canine-like head. If you look at the fossil record, we have a very similar creature. You have what is called the Amphicyon, or bear dogs. The Amphicyonidae was a extinct species of carnivora that went extinct maybe 2 million years ago during the Pliocene. These creatures had a very bear-like and both very canine-like morphologies. They had flat feet like a bear, large bodies like a bear, long tails like canines, and a canine-like head. And
Wow.
people in both in Alaska and Canada have stories of creatures very similar. This suggests to me, at least, there was a possibility that these Amphicyonidae have survived into the modern day. And like even in Alaska, there's stories of the Amarok, or like the bear, the wolf bear, the names like to call it. It's very similar to what we now know as the Amphicyon. So there's a possibility there's a correlation between these two creatures. And this suggests surviving megafaunal species, surviving extinct animals. If you look at down in South America, you have the Mapinguari. The Mapinguari, according to ornithologist David Owen, is a surviving ground sloth, a
Oh,
Mylodon.
I have a
But
picture of that. There we
these
go.
are uh, mega, these are Megatherium. Megatherini is a giant, is the largest group of ground sloths. These were about the size of an elephant to the size of a rhino. These creatures, I believe, wouldn't be able to match the descriptions of Mapinguari, but there's a smaller version of these creatures called the Mylodontians. Mylodonts, we actually have skin samples of these creatures. They had small bone-like pebbles in their skin, almost like almost like an armor.
Wow.
Native people talk about these Mapinguari having like armor and long claws, and they call them the twisted feet. If you look at a sloth, their hands when they go on the ground are like that. Their claws are facing backwards towards them, so it would look like these feet are like backwards. So the native people are talking about a creature with long claws, twisted feet, large bodies, and then we've discovered a giant ground sloth. These two events could correlate. So there's many times that native people are talking about uh, certain characteristics that we don't realize until later on, like with a giant ground.
Yeah.
Like these creatures were truly giant, what we call xenarchtans. Xenarchtans are armadillos, sloths, and anteaters. All these creatures are closely related. So, with me, I believe maybe the Mapinguari is one of these creatures, a giant xenarchtan that survived to the modern day.
Hmm.
There's plenty of times of prehistoric creatures living to the modern day, like living dinosaurs, living pterosaurs. A lot of lake monsters are presumed to be like plesiosaurs or
Like Loch Ness Monster. Yeah.
even though with me, sometimes like when people talk about like living mosasaurs, like if you've watched like Jurassic World, the giant creature that lives in the water, that's a mosasaur. People believe those creatures still exist, but recently we've discovered that they don't look like what we thought they were. They had tail flukes, almost like a whale has. But people that see these mosasaurs don't describe a tail fluke. So
Hmm.
my issue with that is
Wow.
people are describing an animal that doesn't have the morphology that they had in the fossil record. It's what you call a cultural anachronism. Like with these
Okay.
dinosaurs. People are describing how we thought dinosaurs looked like back in the 1800s and 1900s, not what we now know they look like truly in the fossil record.
Wow.
People say they see like velociraptors, but
Yeah.
they don't describe feathers, they don't describe pack behavior, which we now know existed within the fossil record. So
Wow.
it's a weird it's a weird kind of conundrum that people are describing animals what we used to think they looked like, now not what
Yeah.
they actually look like.
Well, I actually did a show about the modern day pterosaurs, and there were so many sightings across the United States. I had to look into it, and I remote viewed it, and yes, there are modern day pterosaurs, okay, or something like them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a question, or YJ Overlander said, I wonder if lore of forest trolls are actually stories of Sasquatch. Now we only have about 2 minutes left tonight, so what do you think about trolls being Sasquatches, like little
Well,
miniature Sasquatches?
I believe it could be a possibility. There are stories of the Hooten folk or like fairy folk, things like that. And I
Hmm.
believe it could have a correlation between maybe unknown hominoids. There were stories of the Tata Duende in South America and Mexico. These are what we call proto-pygmies, small human-like creatures that are like Sasquatch-like. So I believe a lot of these mythological stories of like forest people out in the UK, they have the Green Man, which is like a wild and hairy human. I
Yeah.
believe these are stories of Bigfoot, of Sasquatch that have gone down in centuries of old and have changed into a more mythological, legendary status. But I
Yeah.
do believe some of the origins are in Sasquatch.
Well, Ryan, thank you for that. Listen, where people can find you, the Cryptid Chronicles on YouTube, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, everybody, please go subscribe to Ryan Edwards' channel. It's the Cryptid Chronicles. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I so appreciate you being here tonight, Ryan.
Of
This has
course.
been a lot of fun, and I've learned a whole lot from you tonight, and I hope our audience did too. Okay, so I hope you'll come back and join us soon. Okay.
Of
All right.
course.
Thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July holiday tomorrow. Okay.
I would.
Awesome. Okay. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Ryan. Okay. All right, y'all. That was awesome. Ryan's really awesome. Don't forget that right after this show, you can join the live crew on After Hours. They're going to take you on an incredible journey for the next 3 hours. Tomorrow night, oh, excuse me, what is tonight? Sunday. So it's going to be next Saturday on Off the Trails. My guest is Fred Roll in Alaska. We're going to be talking about Sasquatch and their connection to gold mines, which is really interesting. I can't wait to see y'all there. But for now, I'm the Cryptid Huntress and I'm headed off the trails. After Hours is next, and I will see you guys next week. Y'all have a wonderful 4th, and I'll see you soon.